Hey now, hey, hey. This is Mad Albert, not from the 80s.
You're keeping that one going, huh?
Yeah. Well,
I make one joke, and now this is the thing. I got to listen to this.
This is the Relative Run Readiness Podcast.
R3.
The R3, and we're trying to make that a thing. Let's hashtag that.
Hashtag R3.
Everybody hashtag R3. This is the Relative Run Readiness Podcast, and I am your hostess with the mostest, along with Mr. Chad Sweet, he's kind of my sidekick. What are you, Chad?
Sidekick?
Sidekick. You're like my Robin. I'm Batman.
No, I don't think that's it. You know the old I think they were Bugs Bunny cartoons or Warner Brothers, whatever it was, where there were the two dogs and there was the big dumb dog and then there was the little dog that told the big dumb dog what to do all the time.
Are you saying I'm the big dumb dog? That's what you're saying? Okay. All right. Hopefully you guys like our banter. We were actually talking earlier today about just the 80s in general. It was such a great time with movies especially, but how it just kind of brings out the kid in me when I start talking about 80s.
Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah. And you, of course, because I have like this little da-da-da-da. But instead I go it's the final countdown. Oh wait, I really shouldn't sing, but that is from that song. But I didn't even know I was getting that from that song. I just like to do that. I like to just do my little and I was saying we should start the podcast with that. And then you played the song during our workout, and I was like, that's it. And it's from that show. What's the show?
Arrested Development. Right.
The song isn't from the show, but they played the song during when the brother does the magician trick.
Yeah.
And Ben Stiller, I think it was, right? He was a special guest on there.
Oh, he was. Yeah. He was part of the Magic Society or whatever.
It was so good. That was such a good show, but especially that scene with the music playing in the background. I just think it was one of my all-time favorite scenes.
It's a good one. I think the show itself is great. I think every performance is a standout performance in that show for sure. No,
it's good stuff. So what are we talking about today? Oh, we were going to talk about our
repetitions,
rep ranges. We want to talk about repetition. And it all seems to be about repetitions. When it comes to strength training, I just happened to be talking to Brody Sharp, and we had a nice conversation. Really, he's a physiotherapist.
If you don't know Brody, he's got his own podcast.
Yep.
Run Smarter.
And I do. I listen to the show, and I run smarter because I'm listening at the same time. It's like it transfers from my ears to my feet. So
it makes sense. Total sense.
Yeah. Head to heel, strong as steel.
Ears to heel?
Ears to heel.
Strong as
So
I don't know.
when I'm talking to Brody about reps in our recent podcast, we talk about how 8 reps seems to be a good sweet spot. I generally go 6 to 10 reps a lot of times. But I wanted to clarify on that topic a little bit more because what I think is most important is time under tension overall.
TUT, T-U-T.
TUT. And when you're working through ranges that will, there's different exercises that serve different purposes. So if I'm talking about doing something with balance, like a single leg balance type of drill, and I'm doing this with, let's say, a hip circle band, and it's more about establishing good proprioception. That certainly could be a drill that I do for 1 to 2 minutes even. And it might even take me part of that first minute before I start to really establish balance. So maybe I'm having some hand support on the wall initially, and then my hand starts leaving the wall and coming back to the wall, and just using that as I'm getting sort of my balance established, as I start to feel my toe pushing down into the ground better, as my toes are spreading out more, and I'm just giving myself a little bit of external cue there. Then towards the end of that second minute, or maybe during that second minute, I'm closing my eyes and I'm having my eyes closed for a second or two, and then I might need to open them again, then have them closed again for a second or two. I like to work on stuff like that so that not only am I getting proprioception, that's my body's awareness in space, but closing my eyes, taking that sense away, it's more interoception, right? So I kind of think that within my skin, so within my space. But the point is, set like that can certainly last longer, and I would argue that that will serve me or benefit me a little bit more. So I'm not just trying to get that set done in 40 seconds, just barely getting my balance going, and then the set's over.
Or doing 10 of them.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You know, the other point, sorry, to go off on a little bit of a tangent, the other thing that's interesting about what you were just talking about is changing your cues within the movement within a set in itself. It's not just do it this way and get it done this way. It's listen to your body, understand how your body's moving, and if you need that hand support for a moment or two, that's fine.
Yeah.
If you need to if you want to close your eyes and try that for a second or two, that's fine too.
We're playing footsies, by the way, guys.
Don't touch me with those things.
I was sliding my foot over and realized that was Chad's foot. We had a little moment just now. I really like where we're going with this because I want people to take their time to understand what positions are working for them and how they can get stronger in more challenging positions. And that's not necessarily something that's going to happen in 40 seconds or less, right? Or what you said, if I say, okay, do 6 to 10 reps. And look, I'm not trying to slam other programs, although maybe I am, right? If I'm being truthful. Yeah, our programs are better because we don't just tell you do 6 to 10 for everything you're doing. But I do feel like that we had this conversation before the podcast about how it's tough for me because in one ear, I have people telling me, keep this simple, keep all this stuff really, really simple. And these are people giving me sort of suggestions on the online training part of things. And, you know, keep it simple. People can follow it easier. But then in the other ear, I have people telling me, I love the details. I love the variations. I love that when I'm going down in a lunge, you're telling me to pick my big toe up. And when I'm pushing the ground away, to push my big toe down. And I feel much more stability, but mobility in the ankle, right? So those are things that I think make a huge difference. And those devils are in the details. And the fact is, details aren't always simple. So we had this conversation about how we can meet it in the middle a little bit more, right? So I think that is the true sweet spot, right?
And I think that's going to change as we begin to add more phases onto our online training. You know, the beginning ones, I think, have to be simple. You have to get people to understand a lot of these movements that they're not used to doing. And just like you were saying with doing the hip circles and being able to use the wall or not use the wall and really listening to your body, if people aren't used to doing that, if they're more used to saying, okay, I just need to do this 6 to 10 times or 8 to 12 times or whatever, I think that gives people a false sense that they're doing it right. If they can get 10 of them in, then they must be doing it right.
That's right. So I think a lot of it comes down to control, right? So controlling what you can control and not being so focused on just how many repetitions that you're getting. Because maybe after 5 repetitions or 6 or 7, then you start to lose a little bit of your intentional tension or technique or focus overall. So, you know, was it beneficial for you to continue on with that set? And in general, if I can get in, say, at least 6 repetitions of a weight that's a bit heavier, but with really good focus, then I know I've created the proper stress and stimulus for my body to respond and get stronger. And that's what it's all about. But there's nothing wrong with going higher in repetitions, again, as long as you retain and maintain good focus. So what I've found is that when it comes to mechanical loading and when you are getting a little bit more external stress, you can go with about 40 seconds as being a good sweet spot. Now, why? The way that the mechanics and the way that the intentional tension tends to work with most people is at about 40 seconds is when we see that we start to sort of max out a little bit more. Now, this is something that it's not an absolute. There's never absolutes, but this is something that I've just found.
Wait, you just said an absolute.
I did, right. Yeah. So I'm absolutely not talking in absolutes. Okay.
Right. Got it.
Yeah. But so in this case here today, when we were doing our circuit, we were hitting between about 15 to 18 repetitions in 40 seconds. Now, we were doing hand release push-ups for one of the things that we were working on. So, again, that's just, it's body weight. But when I'm trying to now push the ground away faster, that's more of a dynamic effort. I'm coming down with control. When I say hand release, I'm pulling my hand off the ground at the bottom. So I have to retract the scap and then push the ground away. And as I push the ground away, I'm drifting back a little bit. As I come down to the ground, I'm allowing my body to drift forward a little bit. So there is some technique here that I want to focus on that contributes to my arm swing during my running. When I'm in my gait pattern, I want more of that compact. It's called a parabolic arm swing. And I want to focus on that in the movement. I don't want my elbows to flare out. I want to do I call them runner's push-ups that way. I want to do it in that specific plane. So this is something that I wanted to bring up because for me, we ended up doing 5 rounds, so 5 sets of 40-second hand release push-ups. By that last round, I'm definitely really struggling to be able to get those last 10 seconds especially in, but I'm hitting good intentional tension. So that's how I get fit, right? Focused, intentional technique, tension, right? So this is where I don't care as much about how many repetitions I'm getting. I care about the quality of those repetitions. But in this particular case, that I'm able to work with good dynamic effort. So yes, the reps are going to be higher, but 40 seconds was the sweet spot. Now, with another movement that I worked on with you, I ended up dropping during the set. So I started with weight that was a little bit heavier, shook my arms out a little bit, and then went with a little bit lighter weight. And then I was able to get in a good quality set for those 40 seconds because I chose to drop the weight, shake my arms out, and then continue. So there's a lot of options there where you can continue on with good form, but not necessarily just stop. Like, oh, I got 6 reps in, so I guess I'm done.
Right.
Well, there's more than one way to create more of a stimulus. But because I want more of a dynamic effort, in other words, those reps should be faster in this case, then I will need to potentially drop the weight. If I have to pause with that weight, say halfway through during the hardest part of the movement, and that's usually during the concentric action, right? So that's where I'm going to, instead of losing that stimulus, which is dynamic, I'm going to just drop the weight, and then I can continue to use good speed, controlled speed in the movement. So, knowing the why behind what you're doing is important, but I would say just keeping in mind that 40 seconds is a good sweet spot for most of us. And sure, like I said before, there's some sets that you can do in longer sets, and they can be 1 minute to 2 minutes long, depending on what you're trying to achieve. But when you're talking about heavier sets or you're talking about heavy, slow resistance, that's where we really focus, I think, a lot more on just good quality time under tension, and it's always good quality time under tension. But if you're going past 40 seconds, then that's where I think we're less likely to maintain as much focus. And yet, if we're, say, under 30 seconds, and I'm talking about strength here, we're not talking about plyometrics, for example. That's a whole different story. And I usually go with plyometrics with 6.5 seconds to maybe up to 12 seconds, right? But I don't really go very long on plyometrics because that's a different stimulus. So we're going to stick with the strength talk right now and saying that under 30 seconds, that in general doesn't give us as much of the stimulus that we're probably going for. And, that's where I think understanding time under tension comes into play here a little bit. So I like to get at least 30 seconds, but working towards 40 seconds. But under 30 seconds, that might be okay in more of a beginner's phase where 20 seconds is quite hard for them and they're going to work up to 30, then 40 seconds.
Sure.
But in general, I like to go with about 40 seconds.
So one of the other concepts that you've recently taught me is the idea of reps in reserve, and then how that sort of ties into or correlates to something known as fractionalized training or sets or what have you. Let's talk about reps in reserve. What does that mean?
Yeah, so we're going to take those hand release push-ups, for example, because this is a test that we will give in our program. How many hand release push-ups can you do? So that's what I described earlier. Let's say now for me, I'm in that 40-second period, I'm doing between 15 and 18 repetitions today, right? Now, if I really pushed myself as fast as I could go, then I could do a bit more, right? I could do maybe 20 to 22 reps in 40 seconds, maybe even more than that if I'm really going for it, right? But I prefer to train a little bit more sub-maximally, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, I like to be around an 8 in general, effort-wise, perceived effort. Now, the problem is that a lot of us don't really know exactly what our max effort is, or they're not as familiar with perceived effort. So I like to use reps in reserve. And so what you do, let's say that we test in your push-ups, your hand release push-ups, and we say, okay, in your test, how many can you do with good form before you can't do anymore with good form, right? So we've maxed out, let's say at 10 repetitions, okay? Well, obviously, if you max out at 10 repetitions, and we'll take that 40-second mark, okay, you would want to try to do maybe 8 repetitions, right? If 10 is your max, then do 8 hand release push-ups. 8 will be better because if you go all out and do 10, you're probably not going to have great quality after that in your sets, or you have to take a really long time between those sets, right?
Right.
So what I would rather do is go to 7 or 8 repetitions. So that leaves you 2 to 3 reps in reserve. You're less likely to lose form. You're a whole lot more likely to retain focus. And so, we can...
And then when your next set comes around, you probably get 7 or 8 again, instead of going 10, and then the next time you only get 6, and then the next time maybe you get 5 or whatever.
Or for a lot of people, probably not even that, right? Like they might just get to the point where they can't even do a good rep anymore. And that's kind of the point of this conversation too, is when we get stuck on reps, that same person, they might say, okay, I'm going to get to 10 reps. And let's be honest, if you maxed out with good form with 10 reps, then you're getting in probably poor form for most of those repetitions, if you even can do it, right? So what is it really doing for you? What is it serving? And the answer tends to be that it's not serving you very well, right? And you might even feel some restrictions or some pain. Let's say with a hand release push-up, if you're compressing your lower back because you're not maintaining that stacked position, you're not maintaining anterior abdominal chain, right? You're creating spinal flexion there. You're not maintaining that, then obviously it can lead to some pain, some compression. And the thing is, we're not getting stronger in the areas that we're meant to get stronger in by doing the movement in the first place. So what I like to look at there, like you already alluded to, is accumulation. If you get in, let's call it 7 reps, right, per set, and your max was 10. So let's say you do 8 reps and then you do 7 reps and then maybe as little as 6 reps during that session. You average 7 reps, okay? And you did that for, let's just say, 5 sets. Okay, so that's 35 reps, right? If you do 7, 5, 35. Good. Okay, we're good.
Good math.
Yeah, good math. Right on the fly, guys. By the way, I didn't even use a calculator or nothing. Yeah, I know. Pretty impressive. But so 35 repetitions, that's a good day. And you got in, of course, a lot of accumulation because your max is 10. So then when you go through maybe 6 sessions that way, then you go through and evaluate yourself and you do that hand release push-up test again. I'm going to tell you right here and now that we see that people get better, they get stronger, they get higher in their numbers. So that person getting 10 after doing it this way, it's very likely that we're going to see them go to 15, 16 reps in their next test. And that would be the same for things like pull-ups that people have difficulty with. But you could put that into any archetype really, and it works, right? Doing that sort of 2 to 3 rep in reserve as a good marker. So that's kind of how I think of that. Now, also though, within that 40 seconds, let's say that person who maxed out at 10 is doing 7 or 8 repetitions in a row, and then you have time left after that 40 seconds. What I think is, let's maybe do first 20 seconds. Let's really be as fast with good control as we can be. So it's a dynamic effort, right? And when I say fast, I mean pushing the ground away, controlling it back down. And let's say you get in 5 repetitions in the first 20 seconds. Then give yourself maybe 10 seconds within the set where you're stretching out a little bit. When I say stretching out, like a dynamic movement would be good for your arms, maybe for your lats, that sort of thing. And then you go for 10 more seconds and you get in 3 more reps. So then you've done 5 reps and then 3 reps, but you've done it at the dynamic speed that you want to be able to maintain during your test, right? So that is, to me, a fractionalized set. You've taken the best of both worlds. Now you've maintained the dynamic speed you want. You've also hit a good number of 8 repetitions, but you didn't have to pause and struggle and possibly lose form in any one of those repetitions because you took a little bit of a break within that 40-second time period. So I like 40 seconds, too, of giving you a time goal because when you have forever to do something, then there's not sort of that, well, I think I can get in maybe 3 more before that buzzer hits, and you realize that those 3 repetitions are with really good form versus just saying I'm going to get to 10 reps. And again, maybe those last 3 reps are just not what they should be.
Right. So tell me, you're talking about fractionalizing with those hand release push-ups. How does that transfer over to something like a single leg movement or a single arm movement or something like that?
Yeah. So when you have one side that tends to be stronger than the other, which, we all will have a little bit more strength on one side than the other, right? Very rarely do we ever see anybody with it's always equal, right? So we like to be within about 10% in our strength from right to left. But let's say I'm right-handed, probably there's just more coordination there. So, people can confuse that with strength, right? Muscles that fire together, wire together. So I probably do have one side that's just more coordinated. So let's say that with my right arm that I can do 10 repetitions on something, and with my left arm, I can only do, let's call it 6 repetitions. That's too big of a difference, right? If 10 repetitions on the right side represents 100%, you're at 60% on the left side. So there's a 40% difference there. And we want to get it at 10 and 9 at least. Okay. So that's where I will say, okay, use 10 as the number, go off of the stronger side and then use the other side, the more challenged side, to get to 10. It's just that I think you could do what I call an ABC, where you'll go with that left side, the more challenged side first, and you might do, say, 5 repetitions. So it's something you can do. Or if your max set is 6, let's say, then you might do even 4 repetitions, okay? So 4 reps. Then you do your right side, and if 10 was your max there, then you could go to 8 repetitions. And then on your left side,
leaving
you go
2
back
in reserve.
and you do 4 again.
Right.
So that way you have gone to equal numbers with both sides, right? You just broke up into a more fractionalized approach. So you have the left side that has to end up doing the same amount of work. You just gave yourself a fractionalized approach to it. Now with the legs, that would be the same concept, right?
Yeah.
So say you're doing something like a Bulgarian. You notice I say Bulgarians a lot. I think it's one of the best movements to do, especially for single leg adaptions, right? So develops a lot of mass specific force at the same time. So it's a great movement to do. And we can use that same philosophy. Then I would say, if we add in now the dynamic equation, if you were to get off of doing those Bulgarian lunges, all right, Bulgarian squats rather, if you're going to do those on that algorithm I just gave, and then you do something with both legs right afterwards, and it tends to be something that isn't as complex, right? In other words, something that you can do pretty easily with good form, and you don't have to worry as much about your technique. So something as simple as jump rope, or if you don't have the coordination for that, just some pogos, just getting your feet to hit the ground together, push off the ground together, something like that, or even just following up with some traveling lunges, right? Where you're just lunging from left to right, and you're now focused on both of your legs, sort of coordinating the movements together. I think that's the nice way to tie it in towards the end. So, a lot of times I think it just comes down to how can we address our challenges, but we don't want to, when it comes to our weaknesses, we don't want to think of it that way, or at least in my mind, like this left side is weak, right? No, we just have more of a challenge. We need to get more coordination. So how can we do that? So hopefully that example gives you some insight as to how you can approach that a little bit more. Now, of course, in our training programs, I work through these progressions so that by the time you get to more complex things, you have a better technique, you have a better understanding of your body, and also by that point, you've probably closed that range in all the way to within 10%. So it's not as big of a factor when you get into the more advanced training progressions. Right.
Well, I think you've obviously been around in this industry a lot longer than I have, but I think just out there in the universe, it seems like reps are, this golden thing. You're looking at the top of the Himalayas for, I want to reach this number of reps doing, this movement or whatever. And I think taking that quote unquote golden rule away and saying, no, listen to your body, and, give it more time under tension and not necessarily a number to shoot for. There's something, I got to believe there's something liberating about that.
Yeah. Well, and I like what you just said, liberating. I'll close this topic up with this. I kind of think about Mount Everest, right? And you have people that have gone to the top of Everest, but they had Sherpas carrying all your stuff for you. You're using oxygen tanks, the whole 9 yards, right? And there's another more kind of pure way of thinking of it, that you can go all the way to the top of Everest without any oxygen, additional oxygen, no tanks. You don't have a Sherpa or a guide. You're getting all the way up there on your own, right? So Kilian Jornet is somebody that most people probably listening know who that is. If not, you can look him up. He's probably simply the GOAT of mountain running, and he has summited Everest on his own, right? That's amazing, but that's the unicorn, right? So in other words, between the two extremes, because I'm sorry, but when I read about Into Thin Air, right, was a great book, and you read about someone being pulled up the mountain, literally a rope tied around the waist, and the Sherpa or Sherpas have all their equipment and pulling them up the mountain. You're not taking ownership there. You're not controlling.
There's nothing impressive about that.
No. And so training programs, I think, that are, when they're too simple and you're just, okay, how many reps do I do? And just, that, to me, there's too much hand holding there.
Too many Sherpas.
Too many Sherpas. And yes, while it would be much easier for me to just give out these cookie cutter things to do, I think that when we decide that we're going to watch the video and we're going to see how we're talking about the devil in the details and how we lift that big toe up off the ground as we're coming down into a lunge, and then push it down into the ground as we're pushing the ground away, like that's a detail that maybe seems complex, right? Or harder to manage at first, but it yields big dividends when you take the time to learn it and to execute it. So it transfers to your goals and your needs. So instead of being that person, that unicorn like Kilian, and that takes a person who's probably trained all of their life, and I'm talking about now in the gym, just like knowing how to completely like just design their own programming, and versus somebody who's getting their hand held the entire time. We want to kind of meet it in the middle and, getting up your own Everest with, sure, a guide, right? And so we can be your guide on this, right? And we can help you to navigate and to see where we need to go. And at times we can even help a little bit with bridging the gaps, right, if you will, with our experience. And that's a good thing, but we're not going to be pulling you up to that goal because we're not doing you any favors that way. So,
we want you to cut your own cookies, people.
That's right. Cut your own cookies. No cookie cutting here for you, right? So taking that ownership, right, and taking that responsibility and saying, this is my process, and I'm going to really learn the details in this and get better at it. Because I would say that when we have athletes that really start to understand their mechanics and how their bodies operate a little bit better, then they start to have a lot more answers for themselves. And that's, to me, a beautiful thing.
That's right.
I love it when an athlete starts to develop the answers that originally they came to me for. And now they start to understand so much that they say, well, I decided to do this instead today, and I decided to not do, let's say, as much time under tension or to go for those specific repetitions, but instead I went with this quality over quantity approach. That's a light bulb moment. And so hopefully you guys had a light bulb moment today listening to this. Hopefully it helped you. But this is where I think there's just a lot of misunderstanding and missing links to understand how we can make progress.
That's right. That's what's relative.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man. So if you like this podcast, please like us, please follow us, please recommend us to your friends, family, neighbors. And you can follow us also, if you like, on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube. Look us up under Pendola Project, Pendola. You can also go to our website, pendolaproject.com, and check out our online training where you can learn all this stuff we're talking about.
Yeah. There you go. All right, guys. We'll talk to you next time.